welcome to another in the series of Approaches for a Good Life. Today we are with the Honorable Raphael Trotman, Minister of Governance, who also has responsibilities for the natural resources sector. Minister, thank you very much for taking the time to sit with us.
Thank you.
Um, we just want to talk a bit about governance and the administration's vision for good governance in Guyana. Um, the administration has just inherited a system where there were a whole lot of issues that needed sorted out. Can you just tell us, in terms of government's vision for good governance, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, good governance is something that we like to use, a phrase we like to use quite easily, but many of us shy away from giving definition to it. But I think that there's some acceptable international best practices that we look for. We look for a democracy that is healthy in the sense that it has regular elections, that the institutions of state are functioning, that government is efficient, that it's delivering to the people because the people are who you're there to serve. And so, in terms of good governance, that's what this administration wants to do to improve uh, government. We've just changed government after 23 years, and I think that in itself is a statement that the people were not satisfied with what they had before, and therefore their expectation is that we'll deliver something better. So, for the most part, we'd like to work on inclusive governance, for once and for all, truly trying to understand what it means. Article 13 of our Constitution says that uh, government must be inclusive, therefore, that stakeholders must have a say in the decision-making processes. That means that we must be able to ensure that at the village level, at the regional level, at the national level, the different stakeholders, whether they be political parties, trade unions, youth clubs, women's organizations, they have a voice, and we have to be able to provide the mechanism for them to have that voice, either through elected representatives or an organization as we had today. Small loggers must feel that they have the right to come from a region to see a subject minister, and that right must say that they should be able to tell the minister how they feel in a respectful manner, of course, and the minister must respectfully receive their complaints and address them because that is what government is. So these are the things that we're trying to put in place, and we found that the system is broken all around. We're trying to identify priorities, but for now, looking at, as I said, the functioning of Parliament, ensuring that we have local government elections within the shortest possible time, hopefully before the end of 2016, ensuring that our constitutional offices are functioning and in an efficient manner. I speak about, for example, the rights commissions. We have the Rights of the Child Commission, we have the Indigenous Peoples Commission, we have the Women and Gender Equality Commission, we're supposed to have a Human Rights Commission which is not really functioning, and is the Ethnic Relations Commission. Those are meant to be places that the people of Guyana can go, children, indigenous people, women, and um, the ethnic relations to take in complaints or to address matters of an ethnic or racial um, nature. So it's very critical to us that those function. Um, we are working to ensure that the opposition also has a voice, that they're not, years ago there used to be a mantra that says 49% cannot equal zero, and therefore, now that we're in government, we've got to make sure that the PPP's 49% must not be reduced to zero. So we've got to give them a voice in the decision making as well, not just for us to argue with each other in Parliament, but when it comes to formulating long-term policies that have a national impact. How do we, for example, take care of revenues that are expected from oil? Should it be that one party, the government alone, has all the say? Should we consult? Should we brief people? Let us look at foreign relations. We have issues with Venezuela and other neighbors, good and bad issues. We've got to make sure that civil society is regularly briefed and that we receive, not just tell them what's going on, but we receive comments and advice from them. And we've got to do the same for the PPP Civic, being the main opposition party. We've got to give Guyanese in the diaspora a chance to be engaged as well. So all of these things make up good governance, in some regard.
In terms of achieving this goal of good governance, maybe way down the line, Vision 2020, um, what are some of the methodologies you intend to employ to achieve? Are we talking regulations,
Well, some
legislative?
of it is legislative. Some of it, of course, just requires a change of attitude. So early in the week, the president reached out to the leader of the opposition, which I thought was a very mature act, and it was equally mature for the leader of the opposition to
Accept,
respond,
yeah.
to accept, and so that is the kind of maturity people expect from their leaders. You may not always disagree, agree rather, and oftentimes you may disagree on more things than we agree. But at the end of the day, people want to see us being able to put aside those differences to at least talk to each other. Because if we have a posture of refusing to engage, we can't expect people who have a problem in the street or in a village when they start fighting it out. Um, you want to know why people have become hostile to each other. It's because that's the attitude that comes from the top. So these are some of the measures we've got to look at. And the president has already said to his ministers that you are mandated to reach out to the opposition. He suggested 5 areas that we can start working on. Foreign
Good.
relations, crime, you know the list, agriculture, um, their social cohesion and so forth. So that's a start. Legislatively, we'd like to see what we can do to strengthen the autonomy of the National Assembly. There was already some bills passed recently that made them get their what is called a block vote. So, for example, the High Court or the judiciary no longer has to come to cabinet for funding. We have to give them a sum of money every year, and it's for the Chancellor and the Chief Justice to work out how they're going to spend that money. No interference from government. We're doing the same for the National Assembly. We're doing the same for the rights commissions, which I mentioned before. Those required some legislation. We're looking at legislation that will make the parliament more autonomous, or the National Assembly. We've received from some legislation from Great Britain and other parts of the Commonwealth to see how they've done it, so we're looking to adapt some of that. And right now we're actually completing a review of the Integrity Commission to see how we're going to restart it, but we don't want to restart it and it suffers the same fate as it's when it was in a previous life where people had little respect or regard for it. We want to make sure that it's nationally acceptable and that public officials, whether they be ministers of government, judges, or permanent secretaries and otherwise, respect it and comply. So we're in the process of completing a review which should come by the end of the first week of September.
Are we talking about changing the focus of the Integrity Commission?
Not necessarily. I think it was an idea that was always good, but we think badly implemented. I'm not saying that it was, there were suggestions that it was politically driven. Whether it was or not is not as important as the fact that today it's important that we have a commission that is respected and is credible. And that credibility comes by making sure that the right people are appointed on it, people who don't have a political axe to grind, and also that when people submit information, that their information doesn't end up in the hands of somebody and is used against them as a weapon,
Yes.
and that if I am asked information, the other person should also be asked and should also comply. So these are credibility matters that we're looking at. Guyana is not unique because people kind of are always reluctant to provide information about their income and their lifestyles and so forth, but it's a must. Other countries are doing it, and there was recently in July there was a workshop held in Grenada, and a Caribbean Association of Integrity Commissions was actually formed. So we're quite happy that Guyana was represented, and the expectation is as well that we will draw on the strength of the Commonwealth Secretariat to guide us on taking it forward.
In terms of the role of other state agencies to aid in the process of good governance, what roles or what agencies, if any, in particular, are you looking at in terms of supporting this initiative or this move, this process for to good
Well,
governance?
if I can start off in a general way, all agencies, I have to see themselves as servants of the people. And so, the days of a person going and having to wait for 5 hours to see an official, and then they're told that the person's gone to lunch or you've got to come back. Sometimes that person's left as Equibo, has to find a hotel and a meal and then to come back the next morning. Recently, I was up the Berbice River uh, and I met a Tushao from an Amerindian village who had a problem with illegal logging on some Amerindian lands. He said to me that he had to travel firstly to Kokwani, then to Georgetown to see somebody in the indigenous people's ministry to lodge a complaint. And I felt that that was bad governance. We should be able to provide at the nearest possible point, which is probably Kokwani, an office to take care of those complaints and to be able to remedy those complaints. A person should have to leave, take a boat to travel an hour up the Berbice River to Kokwani, then you got to take a bus on a road that takes you 5 hours to Linden, and then another 2 hours to come to town, and hope that you see the official who will take your complaint. And for persons who don't have money, that's bad governance. So I use a ministry. I'm not blaming the ministry, but I'm saying I take the blame because the Ghana Forestry Commission should be able to handle that complaint in Kokwani. And maybe the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs should have a sub-office in Kokwani. It should have a sub-office in Lethem. It should have a sub-office in Madia, so that people don't feel that they have to travel to town to see the minister to get their problems addressed. A person should be able to walk into an office, get a passport form filled up in Bambadai at the police station, and that is put in a package, it's sent to the passport office, and that passport is processed without them having to come to town, because the cost, it's called, in economics they speak of the opportunity cost. To get a passport that may cost you $3,000, you have to actually sometimes pay $50,000 to get a $3,000 document. That's bad governance. It will take time, and like I said, it has to take an adjustment of attitudes as well. And these are areas that we're working in. So each ministry has a role to play. Some ministries, like the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, I think interfaces with people more, because we want to know that when you go to a stelling or a wharf or a road is either good or bad, it affects from your mood, it affects your health, it affects your ability to access goods and services. Uh, the Ministry of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, these are ministries that touch lives on a daily basis. The Ministry of Social Protection, ensuring that people are not abused and taken advantage of. So we each have a role to play. Some perhaps are called on to play a greater role because of their interface with the people of Guyana. So these are all ministries that I know. I don't have to go to them and tell them what to do. They already know, and the ministers already have started to respond.
So I take it that definitely within Vision 2020 we can see a change to
Well,
all of
the
the
expectation is that there has to be a change, and the people of Guyana, if they don't see the change, but then know what to do at the next elections. But you must not be elected so that you can relax and see yourself gaining power. You ask to be elected so that you can bring a difference in people's lives. And so if you can't, the people have a right to remove you. That's my view, quite frankly. So I expect that we will have to rise to the occasion. We ask the opportunity to administer the affairs of state, and therefore we must be able to respond and do a good job.
Minister, what about building capacity to facilitate some of these arrangements and processes you talked about? Is this on your agenda in collaboration with other state agencies or anything of that sort?
Well, we have a serious capacity deficit in Guyana. The World Bank says that 86% of all Guyanese with some skills, like yourself, live and work in a developed country. That's a terrible statistic. And in terms of all countries in the world, Guyana suffers the most from the brain drain. It means, therefore, that some 12 to 40% of some people with some skills are trying to hold the country together. Agriculture, security, education, health, it's not possible. If we are to be honest, that small amount of people with some training can't build a country. So we've got to do two things. We've got to train more people fast. Three things. We've got to bring back some people, import some skills, preferably Guyanese skills, but if other skills are available, we'll have to welcome them. And the third thing is that those of us who are in Guyana have to find a way to get along a little better. because of the 12% that is remaining in Ghana, we can't have the 12% fighting each other and hope to build. Most countries in the world, Barbados, Suriname, 60 to 70% of their graduates who leave to study come back. In Ghana is the opposite. Most people, teachers, try to get out. I'm not saying that they're unpatriotic for doing so. Teachers, nurses, engineers, they're snatched up outside because people treat them with respect and value their expertise and their work. We've got to start recognizing that people have value and investing in them. So all of these, it's a building capacity in terms of respect for human life and the dignity of life, and it's actually respecting people and their labor, and being able to meet some of their demands. We can't meet all. For example, we've always said every young Guyanese, in my view, should have a piece of land, and your only entitlement should be that you can show your birth certificate or an ID card, and the government's job should be to give it, and all you have to do is say, I'd like it in either agriculture, in an industrial plot, or in housing. And Guyanese shouldn't have to pay millions of dollars for a piece of land. I think these are ways in which we can start investing in our people by tying them to the land, by making them feel that they're a part of it.
Where do you see us? I mean, where do you see us? Vision 2020 specifically, in terms of a country and in terms of having good governance system. Where do you see us?
Right now on a scale, or where we're
Where do
heading?
you see us now? Well, you've
Well, I
explained
mean,
most of
if
what
we
it
if
is
we were to
now,
plot ourselves,
and
if we were to plot ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say we are at about a 2. When I looked at Malaysia, Singapore got independence in 1965. Ghana got it in 1966. In 1965, the GDP in Singapore was 530 something dollars per person, and in Ghana it was 300 and something. So in other words, our economies were not far apart. Singapore's was slightly ahead. Today, I think the average GDP per person is about $45,000. Guyana's is about 4,000. You look at the difference, and you've got to ask the question: what did Singapore do that Guyana didn't do? Is it that it has greater resources? Is it that it had more intelligent people? Is it that it had better governance? And I think the answer lies in governance. So we have grown up as children hearing about Ghana's potential, and it's become more like a kind of a bad word now. When you hear it, you actually suck your teeth and you get vexed because that's all you hear about. And countries with far less have done far better because they've put systems in place, they've managed, they've respected that they're different. Singapore, for example, has native um, Malays, they call them, they're Chinese, and there's some East Indians. Um, and no doubt there were tensions between those groups, but they found a way to manage, recognizing that unless they work together, they would not build together. We have not found that way. We've interfered with, we've tinkered, we've tried, but for some reason it has eluded us. And next year we celebrate 50 years as an independent nation. And whilst I think we have much to show for it, I'm sure that we should do some introspection to say that we should have been far further ahead. And so again, in my view, we have a second chance. And by we, I mean not the APNU plus AFC, I mean we, the people of Guyana, have a second chance. 50 years is almost like a start over period. Do you want the next 50 years to be the same, or do you really want to move the country together? So I see a bright future. I think that there are young leaders who are passing out of the 60s and 70s and the 80s and who did what to who, even though there are attempts to pull us back into those dark days. But I think that a new generation of leaders is emerging, is evolving. And yes, it's important to know what happened, but I don't think that it's important to live in the past. But it's important certainly to be aware of the past, but not to live in it. And I think that the imperatives of working together and seizing opportunities are quite obvious. We have the internet now, we have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have television. So we are educating ourselves. We know what is right, we know what is wrong, we know what's possible. I think that's most important. To digress a bit, there's a Microsoft ad of a little child, I think in Pampers,
Just coming out the womb.
just coming out. I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of the most fantastic ads I've seen in recent times because it is really about this child and the vision of the future. It's a fantastic ad, and we can see a country almost, and this child seems excited to discover. And that's an opportunity that Ghana has again next year. So I am confident that we have leaders who see that vision, and that leadership that I'm speaking about exists in the political realm across the divide in both the government and opposition. It is in civil society. It is in little villages. You know, when you go up the Burbage River, you meet what I call the salt of the earth, real Guyanese who already care who run in the country. They're beautiful people. They sing songs and they have poems and they tell stories about life. And these are the people when you go down deep south in Rupununi or you go into the northwest. These are Guyanese who deserve a better life. They deserve the good life, and I think we have an opportunity to give it to them. We're certainly going to do the best we can. It can't be done without much effort. It can't be done without cooperation. But I'm actually quite excited about the prospects for 2020.
How critical do you see the role of youth empowerment in this
Well,
governance process?
there's this cliche that the youth are the future and so forth. But admittedly, um, we haven't done enough to really and truly
Indeed.
um, present our youth and prepare the youth. About 10 years ago, a foreigner who was working here and said to me, Raphael, this is one of the few countries I've gone to where the older generation is just holding on. She said to me, I've seen it in the churches, in business, in politics, and in every sphere of life. Older people seem to want to hold the reins um, and not hand over. And I think there's always that fear that if I hand over, all I work for will just get washed away. But the truth is, at some point in time, somebody had to invest in those very young, old people who are now holding on, and somebody had
Yes,
to release
indeed.
the reins
Indeed.
to them. So um, we've got to move beyond talking. I'm happy that we've started to craft a youth policy. The country has been needing one for a number of years. I believe we need to go back to, as I speak policy, go back to our national development policy, which was put together in the 1990s. It expired, but a lot of it is still relevant. We can bring it out, dust it off, update it. It had to do with everything from your natural resources to education to security to health to youth. And the good thing about the national development policy, it was developed by politicians of both the PNC then and the PPPC, as well as members of civil society. So it was a document that all Guyanese could claim ownership to without them fighting each other. So youth are critical, and like I said, we're in a generation now where you can't fool them, you can't hide, you can't lie, because you can challenge a theory or a statement by going and googling it in an instant, and you can be empowered just by plugging your headphones into your ears and blotting out the world, or you can look at something that you've just downloaded and get freedom and an empowerment. So the quicker we accept that and in fact cater to it and allow it to unfold, the better it will be for us.
Minister, the administration talks about transparency, accountability. Efforts and other measures are being put in place to ensure this. Listening to you, I get the indication, you can advise me if I'm wrong, that this administration is creating a scenario, creating an environment where Guyanese, we can hold the government accountable. Is that exactly what you're looking
Well,
for?
it put it this way, like I just said, it is the new way, whether government accepts it, allows it or not. This is the age of enlightenment. There's an information revolution taking place around us. And people are not prepared to be dominated, to be oppressed, to be lied to be fooled. Um, or even if they're fooled, once they discover that they've been fooled or lied to, they're not choosing to accept it. So a wise government will understand that phenomenon that is taking place. It will facilitate it. not try to block it. In some countries in the world, there are firewalls put up to block certain sites so that Google is shut down or you can't go on certain websites to access information. The world, and if you try that, people find back doors to get the information they want. And so, in the face of a wave that is upon us, I wouldn't even say it's coming, the government has accepted that it is better to be transparent and open. It fosters better government. When you allow yourself to be scrutinized, it is sometimes painful and irritating, but it is necessary that you allow yourself to be scrutinized and criticized because it brings out the best in you. And if you're going to hold yourself up as a leader, you've got to suffer the occasional and sometimes very often criticism because politicians rank very lowly in terms of people's rating for credibility. And so people say that once a politician moves his lips or her lips, they're lying. And so you've got an uphill task to convince them otherwise, but that's the job you signed up for. So you can't complain, and you've got to accept it, and you've got to cater to it and accept it. So yes, good governance equals transparency and accountability.
Minister, we need a second talk again.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.